Ready to go.
Okay. Ahmed Hussein, first let me say, Mabruk. Is that how I say it?
Yes,
Congratulations.
Mabruk. Yes.
Mabruk.
Yeah, yes.
Is that Arabic?
It is Arabic, yes.
Okay, great. To your victory as you're the new MP for the York Southwestern riding.
Thank you very much.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Now, you're so beloved in your community. In your riding, you actually won 46% of the votes.
Yes.
And in your riding, how does it feel now that you've reached almost 100-day milestone in office as an MP?
It feels fantastic. We're on a really interesting journey. We've had some adjustment period, obviously, coming into office, but I think I'm more excited about the fact that we've been able to very quickly provide leadership on a number of issues in a way that Canadians have responded to very positively. One of them being the stepping up of Canada's commitment towards refugees in general, and more specifically Syrian refugees. Secondly is our recent announcement to reinstate federal funding for refugee health.
Okay.
And that was something that we promised to do. We have cut taxes for the middle class and those who are willing to join the middle class, who are struggling to join the middle class. Our budget is coming up. We've consulted with thousands and thousands of Canadians in pre-budget consultations. I personally conducted 2 pre-budget consultations in the city of Toronto with the Minister of Finance, Minister Morneau. There have been hundreds of thousands of consultations done online by Canadians from coast to coast to coast. So we're moving really quickly. And finally, just last week, we repealed Bill C-24, which was a bill that introduced 2 classes of citizenship. We believe a Canadian is a Canadian, whether you were born here or whether you came and naturalized yourself in this country. So we've killed that bill, and we believe that all Canadians should be equal, and those who commit serious offenses should pay their time here as opposed to being made stateless.
Thank you so much. I'm glad I didn't ask you about the first 200 days. So, for our listeners and our readers, Mr. Ahmed, what do you want people to know about you? Who is Ahmed Hussein? And I'm talking about not just as a lawyer, not just as a newly elected MP, but as the person, the community worker, the person who cares about the people in Regent Park. Could you tell us a little bit about your experience?
Yes, so I came to Canada as a young person, and I found that this was one of the few countries in the world where people like myself and others who've come here can really have a second chance at life, can really have an opportunity to go through something called self-actualization, where we can actually really pursue our dreams and our aspirations. And I think for that alone and other things, but for that, I've always felt it really important to give back to the community, whether it's in Regent Park, where 65 different ethnic groups lived when I was there, providing leadership to residents to make sure that their interests were protected as the redevelopment was happening, whether it is trying to modernize income security for working age adults, trying to provide leadership to youth groups through the Circle of Young Canadian Leaders. I've always felt that it was important to give back, and me running for office was just another platform to do that. So I've had a very long record of trying to give back to the community, providing leadership in a way that is consensus driven, bringing people together, not just telling people what they want to hear or telling people what they should do or not do, but consulting with them as we move forward to make sure that everyone is included and everyone has a voice at the table. It's why I became a lawyer, to fight for the underrepresented folks who couldn't afford to pay for lawyers downtown. I made sure that I provided as much discounted services as possible, or even sometimes free service for those who simply couldn't afford a lawyer or who couldn't get legal aid for their issues. Me being in politics right now in Parliament is just another avenue to continue the advocacy work that I've been engaged in over the years.
Okay. And now you're the first Somalian MP ever in Canadian history.
Yes.
So you know you'll go down in the history books. You're the Alvin Curlin of the community, right, of the Jamaican community.
Yes.
Now, how do you hope to manage the challenge of the great expectations that you will get from the Somalian community?
I've already started to do that. Although I'm very, very proud of being the first Somali Canadian being elected to Parliament, I'm also cognizant of the fact that I was elected by everyone, and I have my first and foremost responsibility is to the people of York Southwestern to make sure that I serve them equally and very, very vigorously be a voice for them in Parliament. If there are things that I can highlight beyond that responsibility for every community, including my own, I'm happy to do that. One of the ways to manage expectations is to tell the Somali Canadian community that I can't be the MP for all Somali Canadians, because nobody can do that. That's 200,000 people. And so I've been urging them to get familiarized with their local members of Parliament, so that if there's issues that they have, they can go to them. Of course, I'm proud of my heritage. Of course, I'm proud of the fact that I belong to that community. But I was voted into office by everyone, and I have to serve everyone. Make sure that we do that effectively.
Excellent. And we thank you for doing the interview with us this morning. It's GAM, Global Africa Media, and you know our connection with the African Union as the 6th region. Now, this year, the last summit, the 28th summit, it's the year of human rights, with particular emphasis on the rights of women. What is your view on this issue? How important is that in your agenda?
So 2 things I'll say about that. It's very coincidental in a good way that this is the year of human rights for the African Union. I happen to be one of the very few members of the Standing Committee of Parliament on Justice and Human Rights. And human rights used to be a subcommittee of justice. Now it's a full arm of the Justice Committee. So now it's justice and human rights. It's not just a simple subcommittee that met occasionally. Now it's part and parcel of our mandate. So I'm excited by that challenge, and I think we can pursue a lot of issues around human rights in the Justice and Human Rights Committee. The second thing I'll say is that other countries had moved forward on women's rights and women's representation in power over the years, and we as a government have now to some extent caught up, if not surpassed, certain expectations. Mr. Trudeau, our Prime Minister, made a commitment in June 2015 that if he were to be elected, and if we would elect a Liberal government, that we would appoint a cabinet, half of which was composed of women. We've fulfilled that promise, and you can see the difference that leadership has made in terms of our political conversations. And I think any future government will have to follow that, or exceed it, but not backslide to the previous days.
Actually, that's really fabulous for the Canadian government and the new Parliament, because in Agenda 2063, which is the African Union 50-year plan, they talk about just these issues. And every country in Africa right now is being challenged to see how much they can raise their female the cabinets in each government. So thank you for that. What is your role, or how? We just came back from Africa ourselves. We're in Ethiopia. Everywhere we went, they were so interested about Ahmed Hussein. They asked us, "Do we know you? What do you know? What can we tell them about you?" So, what do you see as your Canada-African relationship? How can you help to promote that? What do you have in mind?
So, before I answer that question, I just want to emphasize one thing about the previous question around women. One of the most basic things that people are beginning to understand now is if you approach a country or a community somewhere, and it's a very poor community or a poor country that's struggling with development, one of the fastest and most effective ways to eliminate poverty is to empower women. So I think the Africans are onto something when they talk about women's issues. I think that would be the next frontier for Africa's development, and Africa's best days are ahead of it. If you consider the fact that the 10 fastest growing economies in the world, 4 of them are in Africa. It tells you the infrastructure projects, the growing middle class. I think that's a good start, but I think with the empowerment of women, Africa will make progress in leaps and bounds. To come back to your question around my role, I'm happy to say that, so in the previous government, the Canadian government had simply turned its back on Africa. They not only cut aid to many African countries, but they even stopped engaging. I'm part of a new government that is re-engaging the world, saying that Canada is back in not only bilateral engagements, but also multilateral organizations like the United Nations. Africa is a big part of that effort. Canada has expressed an interest in getting into the race to join the Security Council in 2019. Africa has 55 votes in the General Assembly. I think it would make sense for the Canadian government to make sure that we get the votes of the African Union. In my capacity as the Member of Parliament, as well as a Member of Parliament in the governing party, as part of the government, I will make my voice heard for Africa. I've already started to do that, to make sure that we re-engage Africa, not just in terms of aid, but in terms of trade. There's a lot of investment opportunities in Africa. Like I said, Africa has a large and growing middle class. And in that effort, as we move forward, I think Canada has a lot of potential in terms of increasing trade with Africa, maybe even signing a free trade deal with South Africa. If we can sign a free trade deal with Colombia, we can certainly sign a free trade deal with South Africa, which has a much, much bigger economy than Colombia. So in my role as the African MP in caucus as well as in Parliament, I can certainly bring these issues up to my fellow parliamentarians and make sure that we re-engage Africa in a very effective but smart way, smarter than what has happened in the past.
Okay, thank you so much. Now, long ago, way back, if you remember in 2004, I was
Yes.
reading where you had said you don't think you could handle the life of a politician. I'm
Yes.
sure that's coming back to haunt you all
Yes,
the time.
that's true. Yeah, you're the
And
second
that-
person who's
yeah.
asked me that. Yeah.
Okay, great. So now, how do you actually manage to juggle family, home, Ottawa, your constituents, life, fun?
It's very hard, and I think it's the one constant piece of advice that has been given to all new MPs by experienced members of Parliament, by experienced politicians. They keep emphasizing that you have to take care of two things in addition to all your responsibilities, which is your family and your health. Because at the end of all of this, at the end of our lives as politicians or our terms, you come back to family and you have your health. So those are the two most important things to take care of. I've become cognizant of the fact that the job is very demanding. If you want to do more and you want to give it more time, there's always more work to do. So at some point, it's very important to carve out some time during the week to make sure that you spend time with your family and to also make sure that you take care of yourself. There's a lot of stories in the past of members of Parliament and other ministers who've had divorces, whose families have simply drifted away from them because they just simply didn't have time to spend with their families. So I'm cognizant of that, and I'm going to take that advice seriously, and I've already started to implement certain things that have allowed me to spend more time with my family.
Great. You have 2 boys, correct?
Yes, 2 young
What are their
boys.
names?
Mahad and Mahir.
Okay, great. And I have one last question for
Yes.
you. The rest we'll take up later.
Sure.
If you had to do it all over again, would you choose the same path for your life? And what would you have done differently?
I think I would have done exactly the same thing. The only thing I may have done differently is maybe go to law school earlier so that I could learn a little bit more about the legal system of this country, because I think you can't get away from law in this country. I mean, if you look at, not just as a private citizen, look at the role of politicians. Apart from helping their constituents and pushing policy, what do politicians do? They make law. And so in order to really learn that role best, it's important to have a legal background, and I think a law degree certainly helps someone become a better member of Parliament.
Thank you very much on behalf of GAM, Global Africa Media Magazine. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for
And
having
good
me.
luck in the next few years to come.
Thank you.
And you say Global African Media. Thank you, Global
thank you, Global African Media, for this opportunity, and I wish you the best of success. Thank you.
Do it one more time, please, because they were talking while you were saying
Yeah,
it.
that's fine. Thank you to Global African Media for giving me this opportunity and for working hard on behalf of Africa and highlighting issues related to Africa and Africans. Thank you.